Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome everybody. Bienvenue to That Saturday Feeling. Episode, 15? Sounds about right.
16. 16. Come on. 16. Keep up.
Welcome to That Saturday Feeling, episode 16. Your weekly sideways glance, all things football, soccer related. We don't care what you call it. My name's Ken Davies, and I'm joined as ever by my co-host, the GOAT himself. And I'm not talking here about the greatest of all time. I'm just talking about a goat. It's Nick. It's a ram. It's not a goat. It's a ram. How you doing, Nick?
It's a ram. It's a ram. I know it's a funny kind of old animal, but it's a ram. Hi, Kenny. Great to see you. Great to be here. Do you know what? I'm glad football's back. The international break seems to have gone on forever. It's not real football, is it, when it's an international break? But I'm very pleased to see the return of the Premier League and particularly, obviously, the Championship. And you'll be happy to see the return of League One, I'm sure.
Soon be in the Championship, Wrexham will be. But it's I've had a bit of an international break. Hence, I think why I wasn't. Was I around for the last one? I can't even remember. No, you did the last one yourself.
I did it on my own because you were sunning yourself on a beach in Lanzarote somewhere.
I was.
Can't be bad. How the other half live, eh? How the other half live.
It was good. Now, we've got a lot to talk about. Four things I want to talk about today, if you don't mind. Firstly, I was reflecting on this when I was away. It's been a funny old season in the Premier League. I want to understand what's going on behind that in the sense of take Liverpool out of the equation. The good teams have got bad. The bad teams have got good. I want to know what's going on there. And what do we put that down to? I think the second thing I want to talk about is relegation in the sense of it seems to be getting more and more difficult for teams that come up from the Championship to survive in the Premier League. And is that the case? What do teams need to do to try and stay in that clearly isn't happening at the moment? Thirdly, and Ruud van Nistelrooy got me thinking about this, and Leicester, and the fact that it very much looks like they're going down. We predicted from the outset it was not going to work. Why don't great players make great managers? Or why are great managers so rarely great players? What's the difference? And actually it got me on to thinking about what skills we actually need to be a successful manager. And I know you've worked with a lot of managers, relatively well-known managers. So wouldn't mind your thoughts on that. And fourthly, going to do predictions. Predictions come with a twist. It's very tight at the top or the bottom. There's only two of us in it. And we're going to look at the Championship, which is your home territory. So I'm expecting great things from you. So without further ado, Nick, reflections on the Premier League to date.
It's been an odd one. And in fact, in some ways, it's a shame that Liverpool have done so well. Otherwise, we'd be going into the last furlong of the season with everything really tight and everything to play for. The reality is there's nothing to play for in terms of winning the title because Liverpool have got that sewn up. So focus is very much on the European places and particularly the Champions League places, which go down to fifth this season. So It's all to play for. And you can go down as far as Bournemouth in 10th position here in terms of who's going to grab a European place. Now, that hasn't been the case in recent years. And what it's shown, I think, this season above all is that it's been arguably the most competitive game-for-game Premier League that we've seen for a long, long time. And I can't remember a time where a team in 10th position, having played 29 games, is still looking to qualify for the Champions League and with a great chance of doing so.
Yeah, it's been astonishing. And I want to try and get underneath what's really changed. We see that, I was looking at the table the other day, we've got Fulham had a brilliant season. Forest, obviously, stellar season. Brighton looked great. Bournemouth looked great. Brentford looked great. Palace, they kind of have really come good. All of them teams, by the way, take Forest out, they're all London, Southern Coast teams. Interesting phenomenon going on there.
Other than Man City and Newcastle. But yeah, I take your point. Look, the reality is, other than Forest, and we'll talk about them in just a moment, other than Forest, the league broadly looks as it normally would do, other than had it not been for the kind of the collapse of Tottenham and Manchester United.
Yeah.
So if you put Tottenham and Man United back up into that sort of fourth or fifth place, the league looks like it does every single year,
Yeah.
with the exception of Nottingham Forest. So it hasn't. It's not been a year that suddenly amazing things have happened or not happened. It's just that a couple of teams have just fallen out of the picture completely, and a couple of teams are having seasons that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to have. So if we start with the teams that aren't doing well, obviously the two to pick up on are Manchester United, who are in 13th, having played 29 games with 37 points, and Tottenham, who are in 14th, having played 29 games with 34 points. Now, and Everton just below them have got 34 points, and West Ham below them have got 34 points. So Tottenham, you could argue, are joint 16th, if you wanted to go down that particular road. And if you look at Manchester United, you look at Tottenham. Well, we know why Tottenham have been conceding goals is because they don't defend. They've had a horrendous injury crisis, and there's a discussion to be had around why their injury crisis has been so bad. A lot of supporters will tell you that Ange Postecoglou's tactics and this completely gung ho approach has led to a worsening injury situation than perhaps they would have had last year. But they don't defend, so they're easy to score against. They're easy to beat. They don't really have much resilience about them. It's all a little bit chaotic. It's a bit of chaotic football. So, and that you can't really do that in the Premier League. It's too good. Because even the average teams in the Premier League will beat you if you're not well set up, if you're not structured, if you're not defensively solid, if you don't have a plan. And then certainly if you don't have a plan B or a C and be able to adapt during a game. Whereas Ange's tactics seem to just be attack, and hope for the best. The reason why that hasn't worked, and the reason why it's a poor tactic in many ways, is because they don't have the goal scorers who can outscore the opposition. If you had three players up top who could each get 15 goals a season, brilliant. It might work because you just outscore. If you remember the Kevin Keegan Newcastle teams of they just outscored opposition.
Yeah,
whereas Tottenham have tactics to try and do that, but they can't do it because they don't have the striking capabilities to do so.
Really interesting, actually. That it does remind me of playing Football Manager, and there's the option, I think, of gung ho on that, or some that if you're 3-0 down, you might as well play for the last 15 minutes. It never works. You end up losing 7-0. And seems to have got his Football Manager stuck on gung ho. That's interesting. United slightly different in a way. United's issues seem more deep-seated to me than Spurs' issues.
I think you're right.
I mean, you can say Spurs have been so badly affected by injury, and it's not an excuse. It's actually true. United haven't really been affected in that way. They're just terrible.
Yeah, and it's a whole mixture of things, isn't there, at Old Trafford? I think you're right. It is deep-seated. This goes back many, many years.
Yeah.
And they've had squads who are built over those years through successive managers who are they're imbalanced. They haven't got strength in depth. They haven't got strength in the right areas. They've essentially got Bruno Fernandes and when he's fit, Diallo in midfield, who's got a great future ahead of him. But they've never solved the striking crisis.
No,
they haven't had a proper striker really since probably Ronaldo. Højlund's just struggled. It's never really worked for him. You've got players who wanted to play. Who've been played through the middle who might be preferred to be playing left or right and vice versa. Rashford's obviously left to go to Manchester City. Aston Villa. What did I say? Manchester City. Aston Villa. And so it's just a whole mess in there. And then if you want to throw into that mess a new coach who comes in and wants to play a completely different formation that every single player in that team is totally alien to. And he's not only come in to do that, and this is not his fault, by the way, but he's come in to do it midway through a season. So he's not even had a chance to get a pre-season and a proper summer transfer window under his belt to get in the players he wants who can play his system. So that's sort of been the problem. And it's also been why they can look pretty good in some games, but look absolutely dreadful the next week. So it's just really inconsistent form as much as anything else. And I don't think it helps, the whole behind-the-scenes instability. I don't think it helps the whole Ineos thing, the whole Jim Ratcliffe stuff, the whole Glazer stuff, the constant protests going on at the stadium. None of that is good. None of that is good. And it still feels, and I hate to say this because this really is a bit of a cliche, but it still feels that the club and on the pitch have never got it right since Alex Ferguson left.
If there's any doubt, absolutely no doubt about that. It continues to be the story that keeps on giving. It's going to be a fascinating off-season for them. I reckon Amarim's got one swing at this. He's got one off season. He's got a rebuild. He's got to work so much better next year. Now, if he's a great manager and everybody thinks he is, this is his big opportunity to show it. Okay, so interesting, and we're flirting with relegation when we're talking about Man United or Spurs, but we're going to come to real relegation in a second. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, which of course That Saturday Feeling is a big part of, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. 4K video recording from your phone, AI editing, automatic just remove that little mistake I made there. It won't be in the actual recording. Amazing. Super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. I did that on purpose, by the way, just pointing that out. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Now, relegation. Teams that come up struggle. It's always been like that. There's always been a gap. It's never been easy. But is it more difficult now than ever? In fact, is it impossible? And if it's not impossible, what do promoted teams need to do in order to hang on in there, to stay up? Now, just to put it into perspective, the 3 teams that came up last year are going straight back down again, and it isn't even close. Why do you think, Nick, firstly, those 3 teams are lamentably the worst teams in the league?
They are lamentably the worst teams in the league. I mean, I would hesitate to kind of put Ipswich in the same bracket as Leicester or Southampton because I think they're actually a better team.
Yeah.
Southampton and Leicester have been utterly woeful. Leicester even more so since Ruud van Nistelrooy arrived through the door, and there remains, I think, a very strong argument to say they should never have got rid of Steve Cooper. Southampton, as we know, they've got 9 points from 29 games with a goal difference of -49. They are wretched. They are absolutely wretched. They can't win home. They can't win away. It can't be long before they're formally relegated. I'm still, and I'll say this every week, I'm still hoping they win one more game or draw 3 more games to get them to 12 points, which will allow the Derby County 11-point season to remain a record as the worst team in football history. We've got to have something about us, let's face it. And if it's the worst team, well, as they say in the game, bad PR is better than no PR.
It's looking more and more less likely every week that Southampton concede. You could lose that title.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely looking like it because their performances are just so inept. They got rid of Russell Martin because he just wouldn't adapt, and Plevnes has come in. He's no better. He's no better. I mean, it was a ridiculous. I'm not going to lie. This is a ridiculous appointment, by the way. We said it at the time.
Yeah,
this is a ridiculous appointment to employ somebody to manage a club, to try and get them out of a relegation battle, who has never had any experience, not only in the Premier League, but also of a relegation battle in the Premier League. And what he's provided Southampton with is exactly what they don't need, which is nothing whatsoever that's going to help them get out of this mess. You need to dig in. You need to be organised. You need to show fight. You need to have a spirit. Remember the old Everton Dogs of War spirit they used to talk about so much that would get them out of relegation battles all the time. Southampton have got none of that. Leicester have got none of that. Getting rid of Steve Cooper was a very poor decision at the time. I said it at the time. Hiring Van Nistelrooy was even more foolish. I just don't get it. We'll talk about why good players can't make good managers. Well, here's a good example. It's all going wrong there. And Ipswich, I think, have been the best of the 3, but not good enough. The problem with Ipswich is that they were, for the large part of the sort of first half of the season, they were losing games, but they weren't losing by much. And I think there was quite a lot of hope And I think as long as you've got Liam Delap in your team, you've always got hope because he's a sensational player. But latterly, they've started, the whole thing's caught up with them.
Yeah.
And that's always bound to happen. That tends to be what happens with Championship clubs who come up. The second part of the season is really difficult. And what you've got to try and do is get the points on the board early on in the season that will give you a cushion if and when things start going wrong. And the return games, particularly for Championship clubs, are hard because by then, teams who don't know you and you're a bit of a surprise package at the start of the season, they've worked you out and they know how to play you and they'll beat you because they're better.
Very interesting analysis, and I'd agree with that. It's very interesting looking back to that time when, apart from Ipswich, all those teams changed managers, including Wolves. And Wolves were down there. Wolves were right down. I think they were second bottom at the time. And it was so obvious that the decision that Wolves had made as a manager was the right decision. And the decisions that Leicester and Southampton made at the time about the managers were the wrong decisions. It was absolutely transparent to people on the outside. I just can't understand why it wasn't transparent to people on the inside.
Because football club owners know best for some reason, and we see it all the time. We see it all the time. But look, what do you have to do to stay up? Well, look, if we look at teams that have gone up and stayed up and gone up and gone down again, Nottingham Forest are probably a good example of what do you do to stay up? Well, you need to spend £200 million, and then you need to spend another £200 million, and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And that sounds quite a silly thing to say because a lot of clubs won't have that money, but that's what they've done. They spent 200 million quid when they came up, and they spent 200 million quid staying up. And that's got them to where they are now. Fair play. It's not a criticism. Fair play. As long as they're operating within PSR, fair play to them. Ipswich, when they came up, spent £120 million in the summer. And they were by far the biggest spenders of the other two, who barely spent a penny, frankly, Leicester and Southampton. And if you're not going to spend even 50 to 100 million pounds, if you're not even prepared to do that, well, you've got to accept your fate before a ball is kicked, quite frankly. I think where Ipswich went wrong is where they spent big in the summer, other than Delap and perhaps other than Hutchinson, but I'm not sure on him. They bought Championship players.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty. Broadly, they spent £10 million on a goalkeeper from Burnley, Arthur Muric, in the summer, and they had to go out and buy another goalkeeper in the transfer window in January because Muric wasn't good enough. And I just thought it was a really odd recruitment policy, buying a lot of players from the Championship, having just been promoted to the Premier League.
Yeah.
And Hutchinson's a good example. He was great in the Championship. That doesn't make him great in the Premier League.
Seen that so many times, haven't we? So many times.
Yeah, they spent 20 odd million on him, and it just hasn't really happened. They spent another 20 odd million in January time, so they spent £140 million, and that's still not going to be enough.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, Leeds fans, Leeds managers, Leeds chairman, if you're listening, you're going to need to get your checkbook out, right? So,
yeah, but it's my concern here. Finally, to finish on this point, is that this is now the gap between the Championship and the Premier League is becoming too big, because for the first time ever, you're going to see 2 seasons in a row where teams the 3 that come up go straight back down. Now, that's got to be a sign of something wrong. It has to be a sign of something wrong.
I think part of that, by the way, and just to finish it off, is I think the quality of the Championship's going down, not going up. When I see that I've seen a bit of Championship football. Leeds are a decent team, but the rest are very similar, in standard, down to from about second down to about 12th. There's not. You've seen some Championship as well. Do you get the sense of the Championship doesn't seem to be raising its game to higher levels?
I've watched a lot of Championship football, in the last 10 years, but particularly when Derby were relegated to League One. In the 2 seasons that we spent out of League One and coming back up, I thought the level of the Championship had gone up a lot. I was watching Championship games when we were in League One. I thought it had gone up a lot. But this season, I think you're right. This season, it doesn't seem to be nearly as good. And even you watch the teams who are top, in the top 3, you've got Leeds, Sheffield United and Burnley. Leeds on their day are a great side. but they are a little bit inconsistent. I don't think Sheffield United or Burnley or West Brom, if you want to go carry on down the playoffs, or other teams around there, Coventry, Sunderland, they're not great. They're not great.
No, they're not.
And the Championship this year hasn't been great. And I think, to be honest with you, other than Leeds, I think whoever goes up, it's probably going to be certainly Sheffield United, it's looking like now, and then somebody through the playoffs. I think that they could be on for a massive struggle next year.
Yeah, I think that's right. Global Sports Podcast Network partners with Bioniq.
I was saying Luton were playing in the Premier League this time last year. Next year they're going to be playing in League One. They're going to go straight down again.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult.
Very interesting. So, Global Sports Podcast Network partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements, because your body's unique. And because without knowing what your deficiencies are, taking off-the-shelf supplements might mean you're not getting enough of what you need and too much of what you don't need. So, Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right level. So, click the link in our show notes, use the code GSPN 2025 for your 33% discount off your first order. Right. A couple of quick things to go through on managers, and then I want to get to predictions. So we touched on it earlier with Van Nistelrooy. Why don't great players make great managers? Now, I had a quick look at, and it's not scientific, the top 6 managers in the Premier League and what their playing records were, just to give me a sense of whether we're dealing with great players or not great players. Liverpool, Arne Slot, not an international player, played for Breda, Zwolle, Sparta Rotterdam, bit of a journeyman in one country, essentially in Holland. That's it. He couldn't be considered a great player. Arteta. Now, Arteta was a decent player. No question about that. He was a decent player. I know he's a world beater. He's a decent player. Forest, Nuno Espirito Santo, Porto, Guimarães in Portugal. Not an international player, but a decent player. Goalkeeper, of course. Chelsea, Maresca. Started off at West Brom. Bit of a journeyman. Went to Juve, just a decent standard, but not an international player. City, obviously, got Guardiola. He was an outstanding player for Barcelona. No one can deny that. Eddie Howe. I remember Eddie Howe as a player. But he was playing in the lower leagues when I saw him. Bournemouth stalwart, obviously. They loved him there as a player, but he was, no one could say anything, but he was just a journeyman professional footballer. Now, they are the managers of the top 6 teams in the Premier League. And as we've seen, and I've seen it with Wayne Rooney, I've seen it with Van Nistelrooy, it often is the go-to place for chairman to say, I recognise this guy as a player, he must be a great manager. It very rarely works out. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that, Nick. And as a secondary point to that is, why are the skills different? What are the skills you need as a manager? And why is it so difficult to find that in players?
It's not always the rule, obviously. We've seen Guardiola, we've seen Zidane have great playing careers and great managerial careers. But there are also some great players in recent times here in the UK particularly that were expected to go on and do great things as managers. So Gary Neville, Thierry Henry, Paul Scholes, Frank Lampard, who to be fair, is doing a good job at Coventry at the moment. Wayne Rooney, it's just been one disaster after another. I think part of the problem is that, particularly if you're a top player, you focus very much on you, and you focus very much on the game of football, if you like. But being a football manager, you've got to be everything else. You've got to be HR. You've got to be a counsellor to players. You've got to understand analytics and data. And there's a whole world of other things that are outside actually what happens on the pitch on a Saturday afternoon. And I think that's where potentially top managers or top players rather struggle. They know everything there is to know about football. These players, they do. You can't. Their tactical minds in terms of what they know, having played at that level, is unsurpassed. But when you're then asking them to motivate and train and coach players who are of a lesser level potentially, or players that need a greater level of communication, that's often where they can fall down. I'm reminded to think back a few years to Glenn Hoddle when he was a manager at Swindon, and it didn't work out for him there. I mean, this is perhaps apocryphal, but it was a story of the time, whereby even having retired for years and years, he was by far the best player on the training pitch, and he couldn't understand why other players who played for Swindon Town couldn't put it in the top bins from 25 yards every time, because he could. And part of that is, I can do this, so I don't understand why you can't, and that sort of element. There's another reason as well, and that is because top players tend to get top jobs in top leagues as their first job, so they haven't done that groundwork in the lower leagues before they get given the top job. And of course, the top jobs are the hardest jobs. If your first managerial job is in the Premier League or in the Championship, they are both very unforgiving and difficult places to work in. So, without any experience, without that grounding, it can be very, very hard. But broadening it out there from there, there was a good academic paper that I read about this that was published in 2016 when I was doing my research into this, and that analysed 20 years of Bundesliga results in Germany, going down a similar theme, and it found that managers who had played professionally in the top two leagues significantly underperformed when set against managers who hadn't played in the top two leagues.
Isn't that interesting? Now, isn't that interesting? And I mean, we kind of think that, but it's very interesting to get that as an insight, as an academic paper. I was thinking about it. I thought about it a lot. I used to watch Rooney and post for Derby, post interview, and then Birmingham, and then Plymouth, and following it. I mean, often players are not the sharpest tools in the box, are they? They're not. They're brilliant at what they do, but they're not. You don't necessarily have insight and wisdom and intelligence and communication skills. And of course, one of the things you've got to be as a manager is a better manager than the opposition manager. So it doesn't matter about you being a player. You've got to be more intelligent. You've got to outthink the opposition manager. And so therefore, that's going to require a certain degree of intelligence and mental capacity that only certain players have. Let's put it that way. You've got to.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce one more word into this.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's arrogance. Now, to be a top football player, you have to be arrogant.
Yeah.
You have to think that you know best about absolutely everything, because that's the way you reach the very top of the footballing profession. There has to be that, particularly on the pitch, there has to be a level of arrogance. If you then transfer that arrogance into the way you manage, it ain't going to work. It's as simple as that. It's not going to work, and we've seen it. We've seen it loads where managers have gone into clubs thinking, right, I know what to do, I know the way to play, and have failed because they haven't got the players to do that. They haven't adapted actually to the best system that the players they've got at their disposal can do, and they've tried to impose things on players that they can't do, and that just comes down to a level of arrogance.
That's a really interesting point. The other thing I was going to make about this is you've got to be a great man manager, and as you were saying earlier, very few players have really ever looked outside their own individual bubble. They spend a lot of time thinking about themselves and their own role within football. You need to be much broader than that. Very few players are. The other thing I've noticed over the last few years, and Guardiola, to be honest, is great at this, and I think a lot of the managers we mentioned in the top six are great at this, is they are great coaches. And what I mean by that is they make players better themselves. They've got the wisdom, they've got the insight, they've got the communication skills, they've got the intelligence to identify where players can improve and actually facilitate that improvement. And Guardiola's great at that. I suspect Santo's great at that. I imagine Slot is great at that. Howe is great at that. And I just think that is what separates really good managers from the also-rans. And just being a football player who was great on the pitch doesn't give you any of that. So that's Good. I'm glad we talked about that because it's something I've been thinking about that for a while. We need to come to predictions with a twist. So it is at the moment, Nick is leading 57-54, wasn't it, Nick? You were winning?
Well, no, it's now 120 to 54
Really?
because last week we did predictions on all the international games that were taking place over the whole weekend, and it was triple points week. So I scored heavily on that. You didn't do any of the predictions.
I wasn't here. I was on holiday.
You don't get anything. You know the rules. If you don't put it in, you don't get it. If you don't put your predictions in, you don't get in. You're not in the game.
Well,
Skin in the game, my friend.
Well, I'm going to appeal that to a higher court, to be honest, between now and next week. But okay, I hear where you're coming from. But therefore, I better.
Who's that higher court? Who's that higher court going to be? I wonder.
It's Wayne Rooney. It's Wayne Rooney. I can convince him of anything. So it's so I'm assuming for time being at least 57-54. We've got 11 championships games to go. You shouldn't worry, Nick. This is your home turf. We'll do League One next week. Right, I'm going to run down and you tell me it's going to be a home win, a draw, or an away win. Sheffield starting tonight. Sheffield United against Coventry.
Yeah, good game this, second versus fifth. I'm looking forward to this. Coventry have on a great run under Frank Lampard. Their only defeat in recent games was actually at Derby, and they looked pretty poor, to be honest.
Proper hammered, though. You properly turned them over that day, didn't you?
Yeah, we did, and they didn't look good. Sheffield United, I think, are just on that roll now, particularly at home. So home win.
Okay, I've got a draw for that. Hull against Luton.
Yeah, important game towards the bottom end. Hull in 19th on 41 points. Luton second from bottom on 23. It's every game now for those bottom three as things stand, Plymouth, Luton and Derby, they feel like must-win games. To use the old cliche, they are a cup final. Every single match is big. This is a tricky one. I mean, you'd think that Hull would win this, but Hull have threatened to pull out of this relegation zone fight for quite some time, and they've never been able to manage
it. Getting dragged back in
and sucked in all the time. And Luton have got everything to play for. I think they might get a point out of this, I think they might surprise a lot of people because down the bottom of the table, results are all over the place at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to go for draw.
Okay,
I've gone for that, by the way. I'm desperate for a Hull win, but we'll go draw.
I'm going for a Hull win. I think they're going to pull out from relegation from here. Watford, Plymouth, another one affecting the bottom of the table.
Yeah, Watford have underperformed this season. They're sitting in 10th on 52 points. They haven't really done as well. Doesn't look like they're going to threaten the playoffs this season, but they're still going to be too good for Plymouth, so home win.
Same here. Burnley, boring old Burnley, the 1-0 merchants against Bristol City.
Well, again, it's a good game at the top of the league. Bristol City are pushing hard for the playoffs. They're only out of the playoffs on goal difference, so they're sitting in 7th on 57th points, the same points as West Brom in 6th. Burnley are probably the dullest team to have played professional football this season ever. I mean, they really are boring. 0-0, 0-0, 0-0, 0-0. Maybe a 1-0 here or there, just to keep everybody going. It's just dreadful. They're really dull to watch. They are a good side, though. Bristol City are playing well. Tough one. Tough game to call this. 0-0. Draw, 0-0.
I'm going home win, 1-0. No one ever scores against Burnley, so if Burnley score, they're going to win. Cardiff against Sheff Wednesday. Interesting one.
Yeah, Cardiff again, they are 21st, so they are only out of the relegation zone by 1 point. 1 point ahead of Derby. Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday, a decent side. Yeah, Wednesday win.
Wednesday win. Okay, I've got to think that one's got a draw written all over it. Leeds against Swansea. Yeah,
Leeds win.
Yeah,
I just think at home they'll be too big for Swansea. Swansea are
outstanding.
It's pretty much over now. Swansea, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's true. Middlesbrough against Oxford.
Again, Oxford had that big spurt, didn't they, when Gary Rowett took over? They went on a run. They're kind of just hovering at the fringes of the relegation zone. They need probably 2 more wins to be absolutely sure of staying up. Middlesbrough, They were well ensconced in the playoffs. Then they fell right off, and now they're coming back into it again. So they're only 3 points out of the playoffs. They pick their form up a little bit. So I'm going to go for a Middlesbrough win.
Yeah, same here. Rowett's done a decent job at Oxford. That's fair. It's fair to say.
He has, yeah, he's done well. He's done well.
Yeah, he has.
There were a lot of people's favourites to go. They got promoted last year from League One. There were a lot of people's favourites to go straight back down again. So no, Gary Rowett's done a good job.
He has. Norwich against West Brom. That's a big game. I mean, neither sides are great, but I mean, it's a well balanced game. I think that.
Yeah, Norwich in 13th on 49 points. West Brom in the playoff places at 6th on 57. But Norwich are quite good at home, and they score goals at home. And West Brom are very unpredictable. You're never quite sure what they're going to go. So I think I'm going to go for a Norwich win here.
Okay, I've got a draw. West Brom are still my dark horses to get promoted, but they're making it. They're falling further and further back behind the field. Mine. Portsmouth against Blackburn. Now Blackburn. I mean, it's a funny team. I thought they were going to get promoted, and then they lost the manager. Went to Derby. Wheels have fallen off a little bit at Blackburn.
They haven't just fallen off; they've collapsed off and are rolling down the hill still. They've lost 3 games since John Eustace left, and they're all games to teams at the bottom end of the table. They're having a right old time of it. So, and Portsmouth home form is pretty decent. I expect Portsmouth to beat Blackburn, even though Blackburn are in 9th still. I expect Portsmouth to win that.
Yeah, I've got the same home win.
And as a side bet, Valérien Ismaël, who got the job after John Eustace and has lost every single game soon, I wonder what the odds are for him getting sacked before the end of the season.
Right. Was he a good player?
I think by memory, was he a centre half? He wasn't a high profile player.
Well, he's got a chance then. Stoke v QPR.
Stoke v QPR. Stoke v QPR. Look, Stoke are desperate for wins. They're desperate for points. QPR safe in 15th. Again, they're up and down. Funny thing about the championship and predicting the championship is so hard because you never know which version of teams turn up. You can turn up and look a world beater one week, turn up the next week and look absolutely garbage.
Coventry, a great example.
Yeah. Absolutely, and QPR again. You just never know what you're going to get out of them. Stoke need the points. QPR score draw, I think, or no score draw. Again, I'd be very keen for QPR to win that. Very keen, but I think probably a point apiece.
I think it's a draw as well. And finally, we've got Sunderland against Millwall.
Okay, good game. This, good game. Both, Sunderland doing very well in 4th. They're a good bet for a playoff place. Absolutely, they should. Well, to be fair, they're 10. What are they? 12 points. 12 points in the safe from 7th place Bristol City. So they're pretty much assured of a playoff place now. Millwall are always difficult oppositions. They always make it hard for you. But I would expect Sunderland to have a bit too much. So Sunderland win.
Yeah, I've got the same home win. So brilliant. 11 results or 11 predictions.
Wait a minute. You're missing out one game here. Yeah, next Wednesday, Derby v Preston.
Oh, let's have it in then. Derby v Preston.
We were due to play it tomorrow, but Preston are in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, so it's shifted around to next Wednesday.
Well, let's put it in then. So I'll go first on this one. Derby at home, presumably.
Yeah.
Derby won 3 on the bounce, haven't they?
Yeah.
That isn't going to last forever. I'm going to go for a draw.
Okay. Well, on the back of 3 wins, having not won for about 13 games, John Eustace has come in. We've beaten Blackburn, which was a great result. We then beat Coventry, which was a great result. We then went to Plymouth and won 3-2 away at Plymouth.
Fantastic.
The form is good. Players have had a bit of a rest. I don't think we're going to get our injured players back. I don't think that's going to happen now till, maybe later on in the season. But home form has picked up. Confidence is high. Another 3 points. Winging their way to the Rams next Wednesday evening.
I am so hopeful the Rams stay up because I am so desperate to see a Wrexham, Derby, Leicester championship. That is my dream come true. And it's getting closer and closer. The last thing I want to do is see Leicester Derby get relegated and Wrexham promoted. That would just be wrong.
I think the real jeopardy in all that is Derby, isn't it? Because I think Wrexham are going to get promoted.
Wow.
Wickham seem to have kind of fallen off a little bit.
I don't know.
They looked well set a few weeks ago. I think Wrexham are going to get promoted. Leicester are definitely going to get relegated. So it might all hinge on whether Derby can stay up or not.
Well, which is why we need them to stay up. So brilliant. Well, thank you, listener, for your attendance at that Saturday Feeling Towers today. That's been another episode in the can. Thank you, Nick, for taking me through all those very interesting issues about the Premier League and relegation and managers and predictions. We'll see you next week for episode, 70, 16? I don't know. I've lost count.
We're on 16 now, so it'll be 17 next week.
17. That's what happens. You add one to the last one. Brilliant. Okay, 40 minutes of fun. Hope your team wins 7-0. If they don't, at least you're not New Caledonia. We'll see you next week.
During American Samoa.